Well, megacities are going to be big. That's the beginning. You know, it will be relentless. The rural-urban migration will keep going on, and today you have about 54% of the world that is considered an urban population. People live in cities. By the year 2050, 66% of the population of the world will be living in a city. So that's a lot of people in a city. If people keep streaming to the city for opportunities, jobs, better paying jobs, and they keep coming, if governments do not handle this well, you are not going to have a mega city, you're going to have a mega mess. How do you stop the sprawl, the congestion, just, a place growing like Topsy, slums growing like Topsy, which is what has happened to a lot of third world cities. So this is something we have to be concerned with. Everyone thinks of the London, the New York, the Paris. These are developed cities. But the story of megacities is that in the coming years, in fact, most of the megacities and the urbanization of the population will happen in the developing world. Well, the rural population will want to go to the cities because the amenities are better, and I've said earlier, it's the jobs, the excitement, the expectation that life will be better in the city. And I think governments have to deal with that. Singapore is a different story because we are city, city-state, city-nation. But if you look around us, in Indonesia, in China, the rural population is going to the city, or they are going to the city. Governments, of course, try to stop it. And you can do this in many ways by designing to stagger the population. The talk now is that you should try to build second-tier cities and third-tier cities. In other words, not all will be rushing to the capital city, to that mega city, and you can have many mega cities in one country, but that they will go to other cities, which are not as big, but will accommodate their demands for jobs, health, education, better homes. And I think this is what governments are trying to do. Where they get to the megacities, it is a job of planners, designers, and the government to provide for and design for better housing and better accommodation of such a population. And that is the work of city planners with the politicians, supporting them and providing the resources to design these cities. If they are cities in major countries, cities in India, cities in China, you will find it is the same population that's going to the city. And in that sense, it's a bit hard to stop them going to the city. How does an Indonesian government stop Indonesians from going to Jakarta? So the Indonesians going to the city. Will it be more diverse? Well, it's more diverse because it's a different group coming from a different part of Java or maybe Sumatra going to Jakarta. In China, they will be coming from different provinces to Beijing, Shanghai. You just name some of the bigger cities. But there are global cities where other population will come in. And then it gets a bit more diverse because of the immigration. But by and large, governments will deal with their own population coming to the cities. Add on a foreign population. Now you take London. London is now over 50%, 51% of Londoners are not in fact born in London or in Great Britain. So many of them are born elsewhere and come to London. But British people, they come to London as well, but a whole lot come from elsewhere. London is a global city. So you have different kinds of cities. Cities which will grow population, where population would be the same and reasonably homogeneous, except for the diversity of dialect groups and provinces, and added to that a handful, or smaller proportion of foreigners, but other cities, global cities, where if the policy is open, you have quite a major foreign influx. It is true that globalization has brought about a phenomenon that we did not anticipate. I think when we talked of globalization, we talked of free flow of ideas, of goods, of capitals. It's people. But it is people not just traveling as tourists, but people moving to choose places to live in, where they want to. And that has happened, and that has happened at a pace where in every country in the world now, you find the population reacting to it in some ways, except where countries are not open to receiving population. And that is one phenomenon. You add on to that, apart from globalization that increases population, I think we are in that time, in that period, when you are going to have economic and climate refugees, where, because of climate change, because of global warming, there will be people who find the countries of their origin is going to get so inhospitable that they have to go somewhere else to find a better life. If there's no water, the country gets to be more desert, and it's dry, drought. What do? So you will find climate refugees. Already it's happening in Africa. They move from one state to the other, one country to the other on the African continent, to look for water, to look for food. Well, people are reacting now to this global move of people on the move. And countries are reacting. There are new laws about immigration. They are tightening immigration. So there will be some slowing down of the absorption of people into countries. But I think most countries are not prepared to completely shut off the tap. That's not how the world works, because it has to do with bringing in creativity, new spirit, entrepreneurial spirit. Some bring capital to invest in a country, and there are talents that come. So governments are not generally prepared to completely turn off the tap. You get to be very autarkic in your policies, and you turn inward, and those countries that have followed those policies don't find it works out and then begin to start opening up again. Myanmar in the past was that way, autarkic, turning inward. So all countries will try to keep some measure of openness. It's how you moderate that openness and try to deal with it. For instance, in the United States, if immigrants do not come in, there are lots of jobs that are not filled. Industries will slow down, and that's the kind of exchange that people will have to think about.
Well, if you're talking about population increasing in size and changing in composition, so we must separate the two issues. One is just sheer numbers. If your infrastructure cannot support and your resources cannot support, then having huge number, regardless of the quality of the people, then you have a problem straight away. Now, that may sound strange, but actually it's relatively straightforward in terms of solving. Just ensure that you have the resources, the infrastructure to cope with the number of people or bodies, so to speak. But the more challenging issue, I think, is the type of foreigners that you are bringing in. You want to just not look at quantity, but look at quality. Because if you have good quality foreigners coming in, doing jobs that Singaporeans either cannot do or don't want to do, then you can have a complementary ecosystem. So even if your density increased and if your infrastructure could support, you can actually have vibrancy, you can actually have people complementing each other. Of course, it presupposes trust, integration, and you need to work at that. Now, however, if we are not solving those issues, then even though you have slight increase in numbers, you could have a very terrible situation. So I think we need to bear in mind that density, number of people divided by square area. Moving forward, we need to construe density as just a number. And if everybody likes everybody, then the same density can be very cozy. But if people don't like each other, the same density can be crowdedness or clustering. And I think that distinction needs to be made. Well, I think many people predict that moving forward, because of the flow of capital and the nature of technology, and the haves and have-nots actually will gravitate towards poles. So what that means is your Gini coefficient will get larger, right? Your income equality will get larger. That's a possibility, which we should definitely not rule out, but it's not a necessity. A lot of it is going to depend on how the technology actually implements itself and so on. But I think we get a little bit confused about income inequality and the nature of the problem that one should be concerned with. If I make everybody very poor, my income equality will be very low. And that is not what anybody wants. So the issue may not be income inequality per se. The issue is really, can even the lower income have a very reasonable wage, a good quality of living? That's number one. And number two is, despite the income inequality, do I have very good opportunities for social mobility? Because if I have good social mobilities, I am not born and stuck in a particular lower strata, and that might be quite okay, despite there is a large ladder and a large income inequality. Finally, I also should note that citizens of a country do not compare your income inequality with other countries and decide whether you are living a good life or not. Actually, citizens compare my current life with the recent years that I've been living. And so what is important is not just comparing your income inequality across countries, but the way of living, the quality of life within a country, within a household, within an individual across time. And looking at social mobility, those are the issues of concern and the issues that really matter. Well, most people would agree that education is the most important leveler, and that's probably correct. However, it's not just about providing education that's accessible, education that is acceptable and affordable. It is quite important, I think, to look at the structural issues. So take Singapore, for example. One of the problems is that we have a huge tuition industry, that even very good and very smart people are taking all kinds of tuition where it's probably not necessary. Now, if that continues and if we do not do something about it, then you will still have a situation that despite having good schools, students from lower income or children from lower income may not have access to tuition facilities, and they will so-called still lose out. And then you get a vicious cycle, and despite the good quality, affordable, acceptable and education, the tuition industry may actually be the spoiler, so to speak. You therefore need to look at it from a larger perspective and try to address these difficult issues. Now, one way is to simply ensure that you allow people, especially children and others from middle and higher income, to be doing good volunteer work and offering free tuition, for example, to children or students from a lower income. Of course, the more fundamental way is, do we really need these tuition classes? And if we could reduce that, that would be actually probably a positive thing as well. Well, there's going to be plenty of social divides that will definitely come. The issue is, how do you confront them? Could you prevent some of these? And when they happen, do you respond in a good way, effective way, and whether your recovery process from bad incidents are effective? Of course, the clearest divide that we all know in cities, and definitely in Singapore, is the local-foreigner divide. I mean, that itself cut across socio-economic classes and income differences. Right? And that's because people do comparisons, and concerns are pretty legitimate. You know, we can talk about the entire issue. But because of demographic diversity, there are other social divides that perhaps are less clear that we may need to pay even more attention to. One is just simply value differences. Now, if you think about it, as we have less babies, as people are not getting married, there's going to be a huge proportion of the population that are going to be singles. Right, both foreigners and especially citizens. Now, what that means is that there will be increasingly social divides or tensions between, say, people who are singles versus people with families when they're looking for the same resources, and when you have a policy that looks like you favor one group more than the other. So these are potential tensions that one got to look out for, but they are not insurmountable at all. Right? It is possible to bring people together, let people realize that the building block is about homes, so that you may be single, but you can still say Singapore is my home. You could be a foreigner, but you could say that Singapore is a good second home, it's a good home away from home. And the moment we try to bring people together through the notion of home within a community, then it might be possible to integrate and deal with these different social divides in a way that actually capitalizes on their strengths, so that your diversity becomes not a liability, but becomes a strength and becomes an asset.